What's up, booktube? Welcome back. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm wrapping up my December reading month. So December was a bit of a messy month, you know, with the holidays. We're all very busy doing things and trying to do last minute shopping and everything. So I didn't have that much time to read, or at least not as much as I would normally have. Page count is significantly lower than normal, but I did still manage to read quite a few books. They were all just very short books. But with that said, let's just get into the stats. In December, I read 7 books, giving me a grand total of 1,621 pages. I got 2 of these books from the library, 2 of them from Scribd, 2 of them were a gift, and 1 of them I owned. For the format, I read no physical books last month, which is weird for me, but I read 4 ebooks and 3 audiobooks. For the genres, I read 3 romance, 2 fantasy, and 2 nonfiction. And I had 1 2-star, 3 3-stars, 2 4-stars, and 1 5-star. And lastly, 6 of these books were for adult audiences, and 1 of those books was YA. Alright, so with the stats done for the month, let's get into the books that I read, starting with The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This was such an interesting read. This one's about a society of essentially mermaids who are the descendants of African slave women who were thrown overboard while pregnant and they gave birth underwater. And in this society, they have one person who remembers the entire history of everything while the rest of them get to live their lives without the burden of their history and all that pain and suffering. But I think it's once a year the historian shares memories with everybody else, and they all have to experience what their ancestors went through in order to stay connected with who they are and where they come from. But the current historian does not want to be the historian, so she runs away and the story goes from there. This book was so unique and fascinating and just so gorgeous. It's very short, it's a novella, but there was so much packed into this tiny book that it just completely blew me away. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was just absolutely incredible. It made me think about the idea of a collective history and what that would feel like to have the entire history of the world on one person's shoulders and how much pain that would be. But they also talk about all the joy that comes with it as well, and there's the odd time where you get the flashes of memories and it's something really heartwarming and sweet, and how that kind of goes hand in hand with all the pain. I found that to be so fascinating to think about, and I really wondered what it would feel like to be the historian in this setting. In the book, it is like nothing but pain. Like, all the historians tend to go mad over time because they just can't handle the weight of all that pain and suffering. But I really enjoyed the glimpses that we got to see of the history. It was just such an interesting read. I really don't have much else to say about it, but it was just so good and not at all what I thought it was going to be. So I definitely recommend this one. It is kind of a difficult read. It is very heavy, so be aware of that going into it, but regardless, definitely read this book. It was so good. It was so good. After that, I read Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. This is a adult romance about a plus-size woman who posts a cosplay online of a character from a Game of Thrones TV show, and she gets a lot of hate for it because the character in the show and the books isn't fat, but the main actor in the show sees her tweet, thinks she's beautiful, and also as a way to be like, fuck you to the haters, he asks her on a date, and they kind of end up falling in love from there. And he quickly learns that they're actually online friends because he doubles as a anonymous fanfiction writer for a show where he vents out all of his frustrations with the directors and the producers, how they've ruined his favorite books. Which of course he can't really tell her that they're actually friends and they've been friends for several years, because if she did end up telling somebody and word got out that he was writing fan fiction about the show that he's on, he would be fired and lose his entire career. So it's a very tricky situation. It's a relationship where they're lying from the start, which normally I don't like that, but in this sense it makes sense why he's lying, so I understood where he was coming from. But overall, this book was just, it was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't spectacular, but it was a pretty good read. I also gave this one 4 stars, but it might be more like a 3.5, which is still a very good rating. It just didn't quite grab me as much as I wanted it to, but I did love all of the family relationships in this, and they talk a lot about toxic parents, and they brought up some really interesting topics that I don't often see discussed in romance novels, so I really appreciated that. And I really liked how the author navigated having a plus-size main character. I think she did a great job. It's, again, not something that I see ever in romance novels, so seeing a fat main character I was so hyped for, and I love the way that it was done. Yeah, just the plot didn't fully grab me as much as I wanted it to, so it got a little bit of a lower rating than I would have thought it was going to, but still very good. These next 2 books were very kindly gifted to me by the author in exchange for a review. They're both poetry collections by Matthew Stegman, who I will link down below. The first one that I read is called If Anyone Can Hide It, It's Me. This one was really interesting in terms of the format of it. It was written after a breakup, and I'm pretty sure the book was put together chronologically, so every poem that he wrote about about his feelings towards the breakup. He just put them all in order. So you see his progress throughout, I believe it's the course of a year or so. He starts off very angry and upset and emotional, and you gradually see him healing throughout the course of however long it is. I find that to be fascinating to read because, like, again, he starts off super angry, and for lack of a better word, there's a lot of aggression in the beginning, which is one of the issues that I have with it, but I'll get to that in a minute. And by the end of it, as he's starting to heal and feel better and feel more like himself, that aggression is gone. He's still very emotional and sad, but you can also see the hope and the joy that he's starting to feel again as he heals from this breakup. Now, my one issue with this book was the aggression. Because this book was about a specific breakup, it was about a specific person, which he talks about often, that this book was about his ex. I found that to be a little bit uncomfortable because it is so aggressive and angry, which is totally valid to feel. I understand that, but I was kind of picturing his ex reading that book and like learning how she made him feel, and I don't think that's really a fair thing to put on somebody. Like, of course she doesn't have to read it, but if she did, like, I would be really uncomfortable. I think because, like, for context for me, I've never been broken up with before. I've only ever done the breaking up, so like I couldn't quite connect with the emotions that he was feeling, and so I kind of diverted to being in the ex's shoes because that's the only place where I've been, and I just found the aggression being directed at one specific person to be kind of uncomfortable to read. Again, it is very valid to have those feelings. I just don't think that you should directly blame somebody for those feelings because that's not really a fair thing to do, in my opinion. But otherwise, the writing was fantastic. I believe these two poetry books are his debut, and they are self-published as well, but he did a great job editing, and the writing is really good. So overall, great job, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. And his next one is called Parallel Universe Me Has No Scars, and this one I also gave 3.5 stars. This one was more like general poetry. It wasn't so much like directed at a specific event in his life. It was more just a collection of poetry that he wrote during moments where he was feeling a lot of intense emotions. So again, it was really interesting to be able to watch somebody going through this intense emotional state and kind of processing all of that. And of the two, I preferred this one. They're both equally good in terms of writing. That's why they got the same rating, but I could relate to the content a bit more for this one. So this one's a little bit closer to 4 stars than the first one is. But yeah, I really don't have that much to say about this one. It was good. I didn't have like too many issues with it. Nothing worth mentioning, at least. But yeah, big thank you to the author for gifting me this book. I really appreciate it. It was very nice of you. Next up, I read Mangles Mistletoe by Adrianna Herrera. This one was so cute. This is my 5-star of the month, and it is well deserved. I loved this book. It is a very short Christmas romance novella. Our main characters both come from the Caribbean. They are both part of this baking competition that takes place in Scotland. So they fly there and they meet for the first time, and they are immediately super attracted to each other but really don't like each other. But of course they end up being paired together for the competition, and the shenanigans ensue from there. This one was so freaking good. I think I say this very often, but I desperately need more lesbian romance novels in my life. So if you know literally any, please send them my way. I need it. I need more lesbian romance. Please. My gay little heart is withering away to nothing, and this book revived it. So good. It was so good. It was so cute. The conflict in this one I wasn't the biggest fan of. I didn't dislike it like I normally do for romance, but it just wasn't my favorite. But this was also very, very smutty. I was not expecting that, to be honest. I thought it was going to be more on the cutesy side of romance, but it was very steamy, which I'm not mad about. Definitely not complaining, but unexpected. So so be aware of that going into it. But yeah, overall amazing. I loved this book. It was very heartwarming. The epilogue, oh, so good, so happy. 5 stars for me. I then read The Master Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg, and I finally finished up this god-awful trilogy. This is book 3 in the Paper Magician series, which I started earlier this year. I think I read the first book during the Owls in April, and I hated it, but for some reason I felt the need to finish the series. I don't know why, because like I literally never do that. But this time I just felt like it, so I did, and I didn't enjoy any of them. They weren't terrible. They weren't that bad. They just weren't for me, I think, was the problem. The magic system is fantastic. I loved that part of it. But the plot and the characters and the romance and like literally everything else in this series was just not for me. I did not enjoy myself. But I'm very happy because I thought there was a 4th book in this series called The Plastic Magician, but it turns out it's just a spin-off. It's not part of the main 3 books. It's just a story set in the same world, so I don't have to read it. I'm so happy. That was the best news ever, was to find out that I did not actually have to read this book and that it's actually only a trilogy. So thank God. But 2.5 stars, and that's being generous, to be honest. It's probably closer to 2 stars. It's fun, it's entertaining, but just the execution was not good. And I'm so happy that I'm done with this series at long last. And last but not least, I read In a Holidaze by Christina Lauren. Technically I finished this in January, but I read most of it in December, so I'm just gonna throw it into here. But this is the newest release from Christina Lauren. I've read a few of their books and I've really liked what I've read so far, but their newer stuff I haven't been a big fan of. Like, I've tried a few of them now and they don't vibe with me. And this one wasn't bad. I didn't dislike it. It was like overall pretty good, but it also like wasn't amazing either. Like, it wasn't that special. It also didn't feel very Christmassy, which I was sad about. But anyways, synopsis. This is kind of like a Groundhog Day kind of thing. Our main character has spent every single Christmas of her entire life in this cabin up in some nice wooded area in America. I forget where. This year her life is kind of a mess and the holiday is kind of a mess, and on the last day they find out that the owners of the cabin have to sell it because they can't afford to keep it, and so this will be their last holiday in that cabin of her childhood. So on the car ride to the airport, she makes a wish that the universe will show her what's going to make her happy, and they immediately get into a car accident and she wakes up on the plane to the cabin 1 week in the past. So she just keeps dying and reliving the holidays over and over again until she figures out what it is that's going to make her happy. So really interesting premise. Kind of weird, but I was here for it and it was fine. I think the actual like time loop thing was executed pretty well, which is what I was most concerned about, but I found the atmosphere and the romance to be what was really lacking. I just didn't really care about the romance that much. Like, I didn't dislike them, but I was more interested in like the family dynamic and everything, and sadly the family wasn't that well developed, even though that's what I wanted the most out of this. And the atmosphere, I was hoping for this like really cute Christmassy read with like lots of snow and like that atmospheric read, and it really wasn't, which is weird because like they have a lot of description of like snowball fights and making snow angels and all the snow and everything's really nice, but like it just didn't feel that atmospheric like at all. So I was kind of let down there, but it was still like a fine read. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. So this one got a 3 star for me. But that about wraps up this video. Those are all the books that I read in December. A lot of like okay books, but you know, that's fine. There were some really good ones in there too. So overall, pretty good. I'm going to be doing a video very soon wrapping up my entire year of reading, all the stats and all that dirty stuff, so look out for that coming out very soon. But for now, that'll do it for today's video, so thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!